They called it Stalingrad, but those who survived called it hell. What if I told you that in this city, every brick was soaked in blood? And every whisper was a prayer for mercy? What really happened inside that frozen nightmare, when two of the most powerful armies on Earth clashed not just for land, but for pride? The snow began to fall in October 1942, soft, silent, beautiful. No one knew it would soon hide thousands of bodies beneath it. German soldiers marched into the ruins with confidence. They had conquered half of Europe. They believed this city would fall in a matter of days, but Stalingrad was not just a city. It was a trap made of stone and fire. Imagine this. You walk through streets filled with smoke, the air burns your lungs, snipers wait inside windows, invisible ghosts aiming at the smallest movement. Every corner could be your last breath. But here's something strange: the Germans didn't know that the Soviets had already decided they would not defend Stalingrad, they would become Stalingrad. Every ruined building turned into a fortress, every street became a battlefield of inches. The Germans called it Rattenkrieg, the rat war. Because that's how they fought, crawling, hiding, biting, surviving in the dark. And yet, both sides were certain they were winning. Hitler was obsessed with taking the city named after his greatest enemy. Stalin was obsessed with keeping it, but neither of them understood the cost of their pride. What happens when pride becomes more powerful than logic? What happens when victory means less than survival? You'll find out soon. For days, the sky never cleared. German bombers reduced entire districts to dust. Civilians dug holes in the ground, living like animals, eating whatever they could find: leather, rats, snow. Children were born in basements and died before they ever saw the sun. And in the middle of it all, the Volga River flowed silently, the only lifeline to the Soviet side. At night, boats crossed it under fire, bringing food, ammunition, and men who knew they would never return. They called it the Road of Life. But most of those who took it never made it across. Still, the Soviets did not retreat. They fought inside factories, stairwells, even sewers. Every time a building fell, they retook it. Every time they ran out of bullets, they used their fists. The Germans couldn't understand it. They were trained soldiers, disciplined, mechanical, efficient. But how do you fight an enemy that refuses to die? Then winter came, and with it came the end of illusions. Temperatures dropped below -30 degrees Celsius, engines froze, weapons jammed. Frostbite spread faster than bullets. The same snow that once carried them forward now trapped them in silence. But there was a secret in that silence, a whisper of something the Germans hadn't seen coming. Because while they froze and starved, the Red Army was preparing something massive, something that would turn Stalingrad from a victory into a grave. The Soviet counteroffensive began in November 1942, Operation Uranus, a name that sounded almost harmless, but would break the German Sixth Army in two. From the north and south, Soviet forces struck with brutal precision. In days, they surrounded the entire German force, 300,000 men, trapped inside the ruins of the very city they had destroyed. But even then, Hitler refused to let them retreat. He said, "Surrender is forbidden." He promised supplies by air, but the planes never came, and when they did, they carried less food than a single company needed to survive one day. The once unstoppable German war machine was starving, freezing, dying, all for a city that had already become a tomb. Here's a truth few people realize: at Stalingrad, more soldiers died of hunger and cold than of bullets. And still, the fighting didn't stop, because now, it wasn't about orders, it was about something darker: the refusal to admit defeat. The city was now a corpse, but no one wanted to be the first to bury it. So here's the question that haunts history: was Stalingrad truly a battle, or was it a sacrifice? The answer lies deeper, in what happened next, because what came after the siege would change the war forever. But that you'll discover in the next part. When the winter of 1942 tightened its grip on Stalingrad, the city had become more than a battlefield, it was a graveyard of empires. Snow mixed with blood, and the wind carried the sound of dying men calling for their mothers. But in that frozen hell, something changed. The Soviet resistance stopped retreating. Ordinary factory workers, barely trained, turned their ruined city into a fortress. Snipers haunted every shadow, every building became a trap, and slowly, the hunters became the hunted. Have you ever wondered what it takes to break an army? Not weapons, not bombs, but hunger. By December, the German Sixth Army was surrounded. Hitler ordered them to fight to the last bullet. They obeyed, even as frostbite took their fingers, even as their dead froze where they fell. They still believed victory was near. But here's the hidden truth few mention: the Germans didn't just lose because of the Soviets, they lost because of pride. Hitler refused to let his generals retreat. He believed sheer willpower could defeat the Russian winter, as if arrogance could melt snow. And in that fatal stubbornness, 300,000 men were abandoned to die. Meanwhile, deep inside the city, something almost supernatural stirred among the ruins. Soviet soldiers began calling Stalingrad the city that would not die. Even when surrounded, they fought in silence, in darkness, in tunnels where rats fed on corpses, yet somehow, they endured. It was as if the city itself, brick, dust, and blood, had a soul. When the final assault began in February 1943, Stalingrad was no longer just a city, it was vengeance made of stone, and the Germans, once proud conquerors, were now ghosts begging for mercy. But here's a question no one dares to ask: what was truly lost in Stalingrad? The lives of soldiers? The pride of a nation? Or perhaps something deeper, humanity itself, because in that endless winter, men stopped being men, they became beasts, they devoured the dead to stay alive, they burned holy icons for warmth, and they forgot why they were even fighting. When General Paulus finally surrendered, Hitler called him a coward, but maybe he was the only one who remembered what being human meant. The snow stopped falling that day, but the silence that followed was worse than the screams. And here's the haunting thought that lingers: if hell exists on Earth, it doesn't burn, it freezes, and its name is Stalingrad. Think about that again.